I spent all day decorating for my daughter's birthday. Every streamer perfectly placed, every balloon tied with care. A 3-layered German chocolate cake cooling on the counter, her favorite, the one I've made for her since she was 4 years old. 29 candles waiting to be lit. Presents wrapped in gold paper, each one chosen with the kind of love only a mother understands. I'm 62. I've lived in this house in Denver for 34 years. My husband Frank died 8 years ago, and since then, it's just been me and the memories we built in every room. The coffee stain on the dining room wallpaper from the morning he proposed. The swing set in the backyard we put up when Ashley was little. I've kept everything exactly as it was, because letting go felt like losing him all over again. Ashley is my only child, my entire world. The girl I rocked to sleep every night. The teenager I stayed up worrying about. The woman I've been so proud to watch build her life. She works downtown now, dates a man named Trevor who wears expensive watches and talks about investment opportunities. I've tried to like him, I've really tried. At 5:30, I heard a car door slam. My heart lifted. She was early. I was in the kitchen pulling the cake from the oven when I heard voices on the front porch. Ashley and Trevor. I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron, ready to throw open the door and surprise her. Then I heard her laugh. Sharp, careless, cold. God, I can't wait for her to die. I froze, oven mitts still on my hands, staring at the cake. This house is worth at least $800,000, my daughter continued. We sell it, pay off your loans, and finally take that trip to Italy. Maybe buy a condo in Boulder. Trevor's voice was lower, but I heard every word. You sure she doesn't have it tied up in some trust or something? No, she's not that smart. She still uses checks, for God's sake. The second she's gone, it's ours. I stood there in my kitchen. The kitchen where I'd made her breakfast every morning before school, where I'd taught her to bake cookies, where I'd held her while she cried over her first heartbreak, and listened to my daughter discuss my death like it was a real estate transaction. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw open the door and confront her. I walked to my bedroom, sat down at Frank's old desk, and opened my laptop. I made 3 phone calls. First, to the bank. I need to close a credit card account. Second, to my lawyer. I want Ashley removed from my will. Completely. Third, to a realtor. I'm ready to sell my house, as soon as possible. By the time Ashley knocked on the door 15 minutes later, smiling and holding a bottle of wine, everything was already in motion. I let her in, I hugged her. I watched her blow out the candles and open her presents. I smiled and played the part of the grateful mother. And when she kissed my cheek and left that night, promising to call soon, I locked the door behind her and sat in the dark living room staring at the empty cake plates. The next morning, her credit card was declined at brunch. She called me, panicked. Mom, what's going on? The bank says the account is closed. I took a breath. I thought of the cross I wear around my neck, the one my mother gave me. I thought of all the times I'd forgiven Ashley for smaller things. I thought of what forgiveness really means, and I realized that sometimes love means letting someone face the consequences of their choices. The house is being sold, Ashley, I said quietly. You're not in the will anymore. Silence. Mom? I heard you. On the porch. I heard everything. What happened next tore both of us apart in ways I never imagined. But it also taught me something I'd never understood before. That sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is let her child fall. And sometimes, grace doesn't look like mercy. Sometimes it looks like consequences. This is the story of how I lost my house, lost my daughter, and found out what love really costs. This is the story of betrayal and reckoning and the long, painful road back to something that might be forgiveness. This is the story of the day I stopped being the mother my daughter expected me to be and became the mother she needed me to be, even if it broke both our hearts. I woke up at 5:30 that morning, before the sun had even thought about climbing over the Rockies. The house was still dark, still quiet, and for a moment I just lay there in bed, listening to the furnace kick on in the basement. October in Denver means the mornings bite, and I'd learned years ago to keep a spare blanket folded at the foot of the bed. Frank used to say I was the only person he knew who could wake up smiling. I don't know if that's true anymore. These days I wake up and reach for his side of the bed out of habit, and my hand finds only cold sheets and the memory of someone who's been gone 8 years now. But today was different. Today was Ashley's birthday, and I'd been planning this for weeks. I made coffee in the old percolator Frank bought me for our 20th anniversary. It takes longer than those fancy Keurigs everyone uses now, but I like the sound it makes. that gentle bubbling that fills the kitchen with warmth. I poured myself a cup, added 2 sugars and a splash of half and half, and stood at the window looking out at Bannock Street. The neighborhood was waking up. Mrs. Chen across the street was already out with her miniature poodle, Napoleon. 2 houses down, the Ramirez boys were loading their truck for a landscaping job. A jogger passed by in neon yellow, breath steaming in the cold air. I've lived on this street for 34 years. I know every crack in the sidewalk, every tree that drops leaves in the fall, every house that goes all out for Christmas and every one that doesn't. This house is a 1920s craftsman with a wide front porch and original hardwood floors that creak in all the right places. Frank and I bought it in 1991 for $78,000. We thought we were being reckless. His mother said we were paying too much. But I fell in love with the built-in bookshelves in the living room, the deep clawfoot tub upstairs, and the way the afternoon light came through the stained glass window on the landing, casting little rainbows on the wall. We painted every room ourselves. We sanded the floors on our hands and knees. We planted rose bushes in the front yard and tomatoes in the back. When Ashley was born, we brought her home to this house, and I stood in the nursery, the small room at the end of the hall with the window facing east, and promised her that she'd always be safe here. I finished my coffee and got to work. The streamers were in a box in the hall closet, gold and white, Ashley's favorite colors since she was in high school. I dragged the stepladder in from the garage and started hanging them from the corners of the living room, draping them across the ceiling in wide loops. My shoulder ached. It always does when I reach too high. But I ignored it. I wanted everything to be perfect. I'd bought balloons too, a dozen of them, and I spent 20 minutes with a hand pump, filling each one and tying it off. My fingers were sore by the time I finished, but I tied them in clusters and anchored them to the backs of chairs, to the mantel, to the bookshelf. The room looked festive, bright, almost magical in the morning light. Next came the cake. I'm not a fancy baker. I don't do fondant or sugar flowers or those elaborate designs you see on TV. But I know how to make a German chocolate cake that'll make you weep. And that's what Ashley's always asked for. 3 layers. Scratch recipe. The kind that takes 4 hours start to finish if you do it right. I preheated the oven to 350 and pulled out my mother's old mixing bowl, the heavy ceramic one with the blue stripe around the rim. I creamed the butter and sugar by hand. I've never trusted electric mixers. They go too fast and don't let you feel the texture change, and added the eggs one at a time, watching the batter turn pale and fluffy. The kitchen filled with the smell of chocolate and vanilla. I poured the batter into 3 round pans, scraped the bowl clean with a spatula, and slid them into the oven. 25 minutes. I set the timer and wiped down the counters. While the cakes baked, I made the frosting. Coconut pecan, the kind that's more like a custard than a frosting, thick and glossy and sweet. I stirred it on the stove, watching it thicken, adding a pinch of salt at the end the way my mother taught me. When it was done, I set it aside to cool and pulled the cakes out of the oven. They were perfect, golden brown around the edges, springy in the center. I let them cool on wire racks while I cleaned up, washing bowls and spatulas, wiping flour off the counter, putting things back where they belonged. By noon, the house smelled like a bakery. I assembled the cake on my mother-in-law's crystal cake stand, spreading frosting between each layer, letting it drip down the sides just a little. I arranged 29 candles around the edge, fancy ones, the kind that don't drip wax, and stepped back to admire my work. It looked like something out of a magazine. It looked like love. I made myself a sandwich for lunch, turkey and Swiss on wheat, nothing fancy, and ate it standing at the counter, flipping through an old photo album I'd pulled out that morning. Ashley at 3, covered in mud in the backyard. Ashley at 7, missing her 2 front teeth, holding up a spelling test with a gold star on it. Ashley at 16, wearing her homecoming dress, Frank's arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. She was a good kid. I know every mother says that, but she really was. She got good grades without me having to nag her. She had friends, nice girls from church and school, the kind who said please and thank you and helped clear the table after dinner. She played soccer for a while, wasn't very good at it, but loved it anyway. She sang in the choir at St. John's, a high clear soprano that made people turn around in the pews. When she left for college, University of Colorado Boulder, a full ride for academics, I cried for 3 days straight. Frank teased me about it, said I was being dramatic, but he cried too when we drove her up there and unloaded her boxes into that tiny dorm room. She came home for holidays, for summers, and then she graduated and got a job in Denver, and I thought, good, she's close. We'll see each other all the time. But we didn't. She got busy. That's what she always said when I called. Sorry, Mom, I'm just so busy. Work, happy hours, brunches with friends, weekend trips to the mountains. I understood. She was young. She was building a life. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who guilted her daughter into spending time with her. Then she started dating Trevor. I met him 6 months ago. She brought him to Sunday dinner, and he shook my hand too hard and called me ma'am, in a way that felt rehearsed. He worked in real estate, he said. Commercial properties, investment portfolios. He talked a lot and said very little. He checked his phone at the table. He didn't offer to help with the dishes. He's nice, I told Ashley later, lying through my teeth. You don't like him, she said. But she was smiling, like it was a joke. I didn't say that. You don't have to, I can tell. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to say, he's not good enough for you. He's using you. He looks at you like you're a stepping stone. But I didn't, because she was 29 years old and she had to make her own choices. By 3 o'clock, the house was ready. I'd vacuumed, dusted, fluffed the pillows on the couch, set the dining room table with Frank's mother's china, the kind with the tiny roses around the rim. I'd wrapped the presents, 3 of them, carefully chosen, each one something I thought she'd love. A cashmere scarf from a boutique in Cherry Creek, soft as a whisper. A leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover. And a necklace. A delicate gold chain with a small cross pendant that I'd found at an estate sale in Capitol Hill. I took a shower, washed my hair, put on a little makeup. Nothing fancy, just enough to look like I'd made an effort. I changed into a pale blue blouse and the black slacks I saved for church. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, you look tired. But I smiled anyway. Ashley was supposed to arrive at 6. I'd told her that 3 times, confirmed it twice by text. She'd said she'd be there, that she was excited, that she couldn't wait. At 5:30, I heard a car door slam outside. I smiled, walked to the front door, and reached for the handle. And then I heard her voice. She was on the front porch, just on the other side of the door. Her voice was bright, careless, the way it used to sound when she was a teenager gossiping with her friends. God, I can't wait for her to die. I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. I could feel the cold metal under my palm. This house is worth at least $800,000, Ashley continued. We sell it, pay off your student loans, and finally take that trip to Italy. Maybe buy a condo in Boulder. Trevor's voice was lower, but I heard every word. You sure she doesn't have it tied up in some trust or something? No, Ashley said, laughing. She's not that smart. She still uses checks, for God's sake. The second she's gone, it's ours. I stood there, still holding the doorknob. I could smell the cake in the kitchen. I could see the streamers hanging from the ceiling, the balloons tied to the chairs, the presents stacked on the coffee table. I let go of the doorknob. I walked back through the living room, past the cake, past the decorations, past all the evidence of my love. I walked into my bedroom, closed the door, and sat down at Frank's desk. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and pulled it too tight. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank account first. The checking account, the savings account, the credit card I'd given Ashley 5 years ago for emergencies. I stared at the numbers on the screen. $53,000 in savings. Another $12,000 in checking. The credit card had a $10,000 limit, and she'd used about $4,000 of it over the years. Restaurants, clothes, a weekend trip to Aspen last winter. I picked up the phone and called the bank. First National, this is Brenda. How can I help you? Hi, Brenda. This is Linda Pruitt. I need to close a credit card account. It took 10 minutes. She asked me questions. Account number, security questions, confirmation of my identity. I answered them all calmly, clearly, like I was ordering groceries. And just to confirm, Mrs. Pruitt, you want to close the card ending in 4782? Yes. Okay, that's done. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you. I hung up. Next, I called Jim Haverford. Jim's been my lawyer since Frank died. He's the one who helped me with the will, the estate planning, all the paperwork that makes you feel like you're preparing for your own funeral. He's a good man. His mother and I used to volunteer together at the food bank. Linda, he said when he picked up, how are you? I need to change my will. There was a pause. Okay, what kind of changes? I want Ashley removed, completely. Another pause, longer this time. Linda, are you sure? That's a big decision. I'm sure. Can I ask why? I almost told him. I almost said, because my daughter is waiting for me to die so she can sell my house and go to Italy. But I didn't. I just said, it's personal. All right, I'll draft the paperwork. Can you come in tomorrow? Yes. 10 a.m.? I'll be there. I hung up. Finally, I called a realtor. Her name was Karen Ellis, and I'd met her at a church fundraiser last year. She'd given me her card, told me to call if I ever thought about downsizing. Karen? It's Linda Pruitt. We met at St. John's last year. Linda, of course. How are you? I'm thinking about selling my house. She didn't miss a beat. Wonderful. When were you thinking? As soon as possible. Okay. Can I come by tomorrow to take a look? Yes. 2 o'clock? Perfect. I'll see you then. I hung up and sat there, staring at the laptop screen. Outside, I could still hear voices. Ashley and Trevor, laughing about something. I stood up. I walked back to the front door. I opened it. Ashley's face lit up when she saw me. Mom! Happy birthday to me! She threw her arms around me, and I hugged her back, feeling the shape of her shoulders, the smell of her perfume, the weight of her against me. Happy birthday, sweetheart, I said. Trevor stepped forward, shook my hand. Mrs. Pruitt, good to see you. You too, I lied. I let them in. I showed them the decorations, the cake, the presents. Ashley actually squealed like she used to when she was a little girl. She hugged me again, kissed my cheek, told me I was the best mom in the world. We ate dinner, lasagna, her favorite homemade sauce that I'd simmered for 3 hours. We talked about work, about the weather, about a trip they were planning to Breckenridge next month. Trevor told a long story about a deal he'd closed, and I nodded and smiled and didn't listen to a word. When we brought out the cake, I lit all 29 candles. We sang Happy Birthday, and Ashley closed her eyes and made a wish before blowing them out. What did you wish for? I asked. She smiled. Can't tell you, or it won't come true. I cut the cake. I served it on Frank's mother's china. I watched Ashley take a bite and close her eyes, the way she always did when something tasted good. Mom? She said. This is perfect. I'm glad you like it, I said. They left around 9. Ashley hugged me at the door, told me she loved me, promised to call me during the week. Trevor shook my hand again. I watched them walk down the front steps, get into his BMW, and drive away. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked back into the living room and looked at the mess. Plates on the table, frosting smeared on a fork, wrapping paper crumpled on the floor. I didn't clean it up. I just turned off the lights and sat down on the couch in the dark. I thought about Frank. I thought about the day we moved into this house, how we'd stood in the empty living room and imagined what our life would look like. I thought about Ashley's first steps, right there on that hardwood floor. I thought about every Christmas, every birthday, every ordinary Sunday morning when we'd all had breakfast together at the kitchen table. And I thought about my daughter, standing on my front porch, waiting for me to die. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the house settle, feeling the weight of 34 years press down on me like a heavy blanket. Tomorrow, I would start letting go. I met Jim Haverford at his office at 10 o'clock the next morning. His building is one of those old brick structures on Colfax Avenue, the kind with high ceilings and creaky wooden stairs that smell like lemon polish and old paper. His secretary, a woman named Diane who's worked for him for 30 years, smiled when I walked in. Linda, good to see you. Go right in. He's expecting you. Jim's office was exactly the way I remembered it. Cluttered desk, law books stacked in corners, framed photos of his wife and kids on the credenza behind him. He stood up when I entered, gestured to the chair across from his desk. Linda, thanks for coming in. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap. I'd worn the same outfit as yesterday, the blue blouse and black slacks, because I didn't have the energy to think about anything else. Jim sat down, pulled a folder from his desk drawer. I drew up the amendment to your will last night. Before we go through it, I want to make sure you've thought this through. Removing Ashley entirely. That's significant. Irreversible, unless you decide to change it again later. I've thought about it, I said. Can I ask what happened? I looked at him. Jim was 63, a year older than me. I'd known him since he was an altar boy at St. John's, back when Father Murphy was still alive, and the church had a full choir and fish fries every Friday during Lent. Jim had driven Frank and me home from the hospital after Frank's heart attack, when I was too shaken to get behind the wheel. He'd held my hand at the funeral. She's waiting for me to die, I said quietly. So she can sell my house. Jim's face changed. Not shock, exactly. More like resignation. Like he'd heard this story before, in different forms, from different clients. I'm sorry, Linda. I heard her say it, on my front porch. She didn't know I was listening. He nodded slowly. And you're sure this is what you want to do? I'm sure. He opened the folder, pulled out 3 pages of legal text. All right. This amendment removes Ashley Pruitt as your primary beneficiary. Your estate, including the house, your savings, your investments, everything, will instead be distributed according to the instructions here. I've set up a charitable trust. The house will be sold, and the proceeds will go to St. John's Cathedral, the Denver Food Bank, and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students at CU Boulder. You'll also have a small provision for funeral expenses and outstanding debts. I listened to him read through the details, the legal language that turned my life into bullet points and clauses. When he finished, he looked up at me. You understand that Ashley will contest this. She has legal grounds to challenge it, especially if she can argue undue influence or diminished capacity. I'm not diminished, I said. I know that, but she'll try, and it'll be ugly. Let it be ugly. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, sign here, here, and here. I signed. My hand was steady. When I was done, Jim slid the papers back into the folder and stood up. Linda, I have to ask, have you thought about talking to her? Giving her a chance to explain? There's nothing to explain, I said. I heard what I heard. He walked me to the door. Before I left, he put a hand on my shoulder. You're a good person, Linda. Whatever happens, remember that. I drove home and waited for Karen Ellis. She arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, driving a white Lexus with a vanity plate that read, "Sold for you." She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with perfect blonde hair and a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But when she shook my hand, her grip was firm, and her smile seemed genuine. Mrs. Pruitt, thank you for having me. Can I take a look around? I showed her the house. She walked through every room, taking notes on a tablet, snapping photos with her phone. She opened closets, checked the furnace, peered into the crawl space in the basement. She tested the faucets, looked at the roof from the backyard, measured the square footage of the living room. When she was done, we sat at the kitchen table. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her tablet, showed me numbers and comparisons and market trends. Mrs. Pruitt, this is a beautiful property. Original hardwood, great bones, excellent location. Based on recent sales in this neighborhood, I'd list it at $850,000. We'll probably get offers over asking. This area is hot right now. Young families moving in, investors buying up rentals. You'll have multiple bids within the first week. $850,000. Ashley had guessed 800. She'd been close. How soon can we list it? I asked. Karen didn't blink. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. We'll schedule a photographer, stage a few rooms if you want, and list it by the end of the week. If you need help finding a place to move, I can recommend some good apartments, senior communities. I'll find my own place, I said. Of course, whatever you need. She left me a contract to review, told me to call if I had questions, and drove away in her white Lexus. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the contract. $850,000. A lifetime of memories, reduced to a number on a page. That night, Ashley called. I was in the living room boxing up books from the built-in shelves when my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I thought about not answering, but I picked it up. Hi, sweetheart. Mom, hey. I just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday. The cake was amazing. You really outdid yourself. Her voice was bright, cheerful. The same voice she'd used on the porch, talking about my death like it was a vacation she was planning. I'm glad you enjoyed it, I said. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we could have lunch this week. Just the two of us. There's this new place in Lohi I've been wanting to try. I'm pretty busy this week, I said. Oh, okay. Well, maybe next week? Maybe. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, just tired. Okay, well, get some rest. Love you. Love you too, I said, and hung up before she could say anything else. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the boxes of books stacked around me. I thought about all the times I'd read to her as a child, curled up on this couch, her head on my shoulder, her voice asking me to read just one more chapter. I put the phone down and kept packing. By the end of the week, the house was listed. Karen's photographer had come through, taken pictures that made every room look like something out of a design magazine. The listing went live on Thursday, and by Friday afternoon, we had 6 showings scheduled for the weekend. I moved through the house like a ghost, staying out of the way while strangers walked through my life. They opened cabinets, commented on the light fixtures, asked questions about the furnace and the roof and the plumbing. They stood in Ashley's old bedroom and talked about turning it into a home office. They stood in the kitchen where Frank had proposed and discussed knocking down a wall to open up the space. By Sunday night, we had 4 offers, all of them over asking. Karen called me Monday morning. "Mrs. Pruitt, I have great news. We've got a cash offer for $910,000. Young couple, 2 kids, pre-approved financing, no contingencies. They want to close in 30 days. I think we should take it." "Take it," I said. "Wonderful. I'll send over the paperwork." That afternoon, Ashley's credit card was declined at brunch. I know this because she called me 20 minutes later, her voice high and tight, the way it used to sound when she was a teenager and something had gone wrong at school. "Mom, what's going on? I tried to use my card and it was declined. I called the bank and they said the account was closed." I was standing in the bedroom packing clothes into boxes. I stopped, sat down on the edge of the bed. "I closed it," I said. "What? Why?" "Because it's my account, and I don't want you using it anymore." "Mom, I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" I closed my eyes. I thought about lying. I thought about making up some excuse, something easy and painless that would let this conversation end without blood on the floor. But I didn't. "I heard you, Ashley. On the porch. On your birthday." Silence. "I heard you tell Trevor that you couldn't wait for me to die so you could sell my house." More silence. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. "Mom, the house is being sold," I said. "I've already accepted an offer. I'll be moving in 3 weeks." "Wait, what? You're selling the house?" "Yes." "Where are you going to live?" "I found an apartment near Cheeseman Park." "Mom, stop. This is crazy. You can't just... And you're not in the will anymore," I said. "I met with Jim last week. Everything's going to charity." I heard her breath catch, like she'd been punched. "You can't do that." "I already did." "Mom, please, let me explain. It didn't mean..." "Goodbye, Ashley." I hung up. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the boxes around me, and I thought about the years I'd spent in this room, the nights I'd lain awake next to Frank, listening to him snore, feeling grateful for the sound, the mornings I'd woken up alone, reaching for him out of habit, finding only empty space. The phone rang again. "Ashley." I didn't answer. She called 6 more times that afternoon. Then Trevor called. Then Ashley again. I turned the phone off and kept packing. That night there was a knock on the door. I knew it was her before I opened it. I could see her car parked at the curb, Trevor sitting in the driver's seat watching. Ashley stood on the porch, her face blotchy and red, mascara smudged under her eyes. "Mom, please, can we talk?" I didn't open the screen door. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is. I made a mistake. I said something stupid, something I didn't mean." "You meant it." "No, I didn't. I was just... Trevor and I were joking around. We'd had a couple drinks. I wasn't thinking. You said you couldn't wait for me to die." She flinched. I know that sounds terrible. But Mom, you have to understand. I didn't mean it like that. I love you. I would never..." "Stop," I said. "Just stop." Tears were streaming down her face now, and I felt something crack inside me. Because she was still my daughter. She was still the little girl who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd held my hand crossing the street, who'd cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. But she was also the woman who'd stood on this porch and talked about my death like it was a business opportunity. "You can't sell the house," she said. "This is my home. It was your home. It's not anymore. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem." She stared at me. "You're really doing this? You're really cutting me out?" "Yes." "Because of one stupid thing I said?" "Because you meant it." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Fine, if that's what you want. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you change your mind." "I won't," I said. She turned and walked back to the car. Trevor was out of the driver's seat now, standing by the door, watching us. Ashley said something to him, something I couldn't hear, and he glanced at me with a look that made my stomach turn. Calculation? Anger? He'd lost something he thought was his. They drove away. I closed the door, locked it, and sat down on the couch in the dark living room. And then finally I cried. I cried for the daughter I thought I had, and for the woman she'd become. I cried for Frank, who would have known what to do, who would have had the right words to make this hurt less. I cried for this house, for the life I'd built here, for the memories that were being packed into boxes and carried away. But even as I cried, I knew I'd made the right choice. Because love isn't just forgiveness. It isn't just patience and kindness and turning the other cheek. Sometimes love is letting someone face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes love is saying no. Sometimes love is walking away. And sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is let her child fall. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. I packed everything I owned, donated half of it to Goodwill, threw away another quarter. I kept only what mattered: Frank's wedding ring, our photo albums, my mother's mixing bowl, the cross necklace I wore every day. I found an apartment in Capitol Hill, a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building with hardwood floors and a view of the park. It was a quarter the size of my house, but it was clean and quiet, and mine. Ashley called twice more. I didn't answer. Trevor called once, left a voicemail threatening legal action. I forwarded it to Jim, who called me back an hour later. "He's bluffing," Jim said. "He has no grounds for a lawsuit. Let him try." On the day of the closing, I met Karen at her office. We signed papers for an hour, my hand cramping, my eyes blurring from reading legal text. When it was done, Karen handed me a check for $893,000, minus her commission and closing costs. "Congratulations, Mrs. Pruitt. You're officially a homeowner no more." I looked at the check, $900,000, more money than I'd ever held in my life. "Thank you," I said. That night, I stood in the empty house one last time. The new owners were moving in the next day. Karen had left the keys with them, told them I'd be out by 6 p.m. I walked through every room: the living room where Ashley had taken her first steps, the kitchen where Frank had made me breakfast every Sunday morning, the bedroom where I'd slept for 34 years, the small room at the end of the hall, the nursery, where I'd rocked Ashley to sleep every night for the first 2 years of her life. I stood in the doorway of that room and closed my eyes. I could still see her, tiny, perfect, wrapped in the yellow blanket my mother had crocheted. I could still hear her breathing, that soft, steady rhythm that used to lull me to sleep. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." But I wasn't sure if I was apologizing to Ashley or to the little girl she used to be. I left the house at 5:30. I locked the door for the last time, left the keys under the mat the way Karen had instructed, and drove away without looking back. I didn't go to my new apartment. Not yet. Instead, I drove to St. John's Cathedral. The evening mass had just ended, and the church was nearly empty. A few people knelt in the pews, heads bowed, lips moving in silent prayer. Candles flickered in the side alcoves, casting long shadows on the walls. I slid into a pew near the back and sat down. I'd been coming to this church for 40 years. Frank and I were married here. Ashley was baptized here. I'd sat in these pews every Sunday, through good times and bad, through joy and grief and everything in between. I didn't know what to pray for. I didn't know if I was right or wrong, if I was being strong or just cruel. I didn't know if Ashley would ever forgive me, or if I'd ever forgive her. But I bowed my head, and I whispered the only prayer I could remember: "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of the day settle on my shoulders like a heavy coat. And when I finally stood up to leave, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace exactly, not resolution, but something like acceptance. I had let go of my house, and now I had to figure out how to let go of my daughter. The apartment on Humboldt Street was nothing like the house on Bannock. It was small, just one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a living room barely big enough for a couch and a chair. The floors were scuffed hardwood that creaked when I walked. The bathroom had old porcelain fixtures and a shower with water pressure that fluctuated between a trickle and a fire hose. The windows faced east, which meant the morning sun came in hard and bright. Too bright for someone who wasn't sleeping well anyway. But it was mine. And for now, that was enough. I spent the first week unpacking boxes, trying to figure out where everything should go. My mother's mixing bowl on the kitchen counter, Frank's reading lamp next to the couch, photo albums stacked on the shelf by the window. I hung a few pictures on the walls. Frank and me on our wedding day, Ashley as a baby, a print of the mountains that I'd bought at a craft fair years ago. When I was done, the apartment still felt empty, but it felt honest too. Like I'd stripped away everything that didn't matter and kept only what was true. I didn't hear from Ashley for 3 weeks. At first, I checked my phone constantly, expecting her to call, to text, to show up at my door demanding to talk. But she didn't. The silence stretched out day after day until I stopped checking. I told myself I was relieved. I told myself this was what I wanted: space, distance, a clean break. But late at night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar apartment, I felt the absence of her like a missing tooth. My tongue kept going to the empty space, probing the wound. I tried to build a routine. I went for walks in Cheeseman Park every morning, circling the path that wound through the trees and around the pavilion. I volunteered at the food bank on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sorting donations, packing boxes, handing out canned goods and rice to people who looked as tired as I felt. I went to Mass every Sunday, sitting in the back pew at St. John's, letting the familiar rhythms of the liturgy wash over me like water. And every night I prayed. I prayed for Ashley, for her heart, her soul, whatever had turned her into someone I didn't recognize. I prayed for wisdom, for clarity, for the strength to stay the course. I prayed for Frank, wherever he was, asking him if I'd done the right thing. I didn't get answers, but I kept praying anyway. One afternoon in late November, I was at the food bank when I saw her. She was standing near the entrance talking to one of the volunteers, a young man named Marcus who was studying social work at Metro State. She was thinner than I remembered, her face pale, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and an old sweater I recognized from high school, the navy one with the hole in the elbow that she'd refused to throw away. I froze, a box of canned vegetables in my hands. Marcus pointed in my direction, and Ashley turned. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me, slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Mom," she said. "Ashley." We stood there, awkward and uncertain. Around us, volunteers kept working, voices murmuring, boxes scraping across the floor. "Can we talk?" she asked. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She'd been crying recently. Her eyes were red-rimmed, swollen. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hands were shaking. "Okay," I said. We went outside, sat on a bench near the parking lot. The November air was cold, sharp, the kind of cold that gets into your bones. Ashley hugged herself, shivering, and I almost offered her my jacket. Almost. "I didn't know you volunteered here," she said. "I started a few weeks ago." She nodded, stared at her hands. "I've been coming here, getting food." I felt something twist in my chest. "Why?" "Because I lost my job." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. 2 weeks after you sold the house. They said they were downsizing. But I think Trevor said something to his friend who works there. Because the timing was... She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter. I lost the job. And Trevor left." "Left?" "Yeah. The day I told him you'd cut me out of the will, he said he needed space. A week later, he broke up with me, via text." She laughed, a bitter sound. "Turns out he was really invested in my inheritance." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. Ashley continued. "So I had to move. I'm staying with my friend Jenna in Aurora, sleeping on her couch. I've been applying for jobs, but nothing's come through yet. I've been living off my savings, but that's almost gone, so I started coming here." She gestured toward the food bank. "I didn't think I'd see you." "I didn't think I'd see you either." She looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Mom, I'm so sorry for what I said, for everything. I was horrible. I was cruel. And I've been thinking about it every day since you cut me off, trying to figure out when I turned into someone who could say something like that. And I don't know. I don't know when it happened, but I'm sorry." I watched her cry. Part of me wanted to reach out, to pull her into my arms the way I used to when she was small, to tell her it was okay, that I forgave her, that everything would be fine. But another part of me, a harder, colder part, held back. "Why did you come here?" I asked. "Why this food bank?" She wiped her eyes. "I didn't plan it. Jenna told me about it. I didn't know you volunteered here until I saw you. But now that you know, why did you come inside? Why didn't you just leave?" She looked at me for a long time. "Because I need help, and because I miss you." The words hung in the air between us, fragile and raw. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready." "I know," she said. "I don't expect you to. I I needed you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm trying to do better. We sat there in silence, watching cars pull in and out of the parking lot. A family walked past us, a mother and two small kids, the mother carrying a box of groceries, the kids bundling in their jackets against the cold. Are you eating? I asked finally. Ashley nodded. Yeah, Jenna's been really good to me. And the food bank. She gestured toward the building. It helps. Good. Another long silence. I should go, Ashley said. I don't want to make this weird for you. She stood up and I stood up too. We faced each other, two women who used to be mother and daughter, now strangers trying to find a way back. Ashley, I said, come to dinner. She blinked. What? Next Sunday. My apartment, 6 o'clock. Mom? I'm not promising anything, I said quickly. I'm not saying we're okay, but I'm saying come to dinner. We can talk or not talk. Whatever feels right. Her face crumpled and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Okay, yeah, I'll be there. I gave her the address, wrote it on a scrap of paper from my purse. She took it, folded it carefully, put it in her pocket. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded and she walked away. I stood there for a long time after she was gone, feeling the cold seep into my bones, wondering what I'd just done. Sunday came. I spent all afternoon cooking. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the way Frank used to make it. Green beans with almonds, rolls from the bakery down the street. I set the table with the plates I'd kept from the house, the everyday ones, not Frank's mother's china. I put out water glasses, cloth napkins, salt and pepper. At 5:30, I started to panic. What if she didn't come? What if she came and we had nothing to say to each other? What if I'd made a terrible mistake? At 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there was Ashley. She'd dressed up, dark jeans, a nice blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. She was holding a bottle of wine. I know it's not much, she said, holding it out, but I wanted to bring something. You didn't have to. I wanted to. I let her in, took the wine, set it on the counter. She looked around the apartment, taking in the small space, the few pieces of furniture, the pictures on the wall. It's nice, she said. Cozy. It's small. Small is okay. We stood there, awkward again, neither of us sure how to start. Dinner's ready, I said finally. Are you hungry? Starving. We sat down at the little table by the window. I served the pot roast, passed her the rolls, filled our water glasses. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clink of forks on plates. This is really good, Ashley said. It's your dad's recipe. I remember. She smiled, a small, sad smile. He used to make this on Sundays. Every Sunday, for 23 years. We kept eating. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. It was just silence, the kind that two people fill when they're trying to figure out where to start. Finally, Ashley put down her fork. Mom, can I ask you something? Okay. Why did you invite me here? After everything I did, why didn't you leave it alone? I thought about it. I thought about the weeks of silence, the anger, the hurt, the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I'd been too harsh, too cruel, too unforgiving. Because you're still my daughter, I said. And because I went to Mass last Sunday and Father Rodriguez talked about the prodigal son. And I sat there thinking about how the father in that story didn't wait for an apology. He saw his son coming from far off, and he ran to meet him. And I realized, I've been waiting for you to prove you'd changed before I'd even give you a chance. And that's not... I stopped, took a breath. That's not love. That's not what I want to be. Ashley's eyes filled with tears again. I don't deserve this. None of us deserve grace, I said quietly. That's why it's called grace. She cried then, really cried, and I got up and went around the table and held her. I held her the way I used to when she was small, the way I'd held her through nightmares and scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. I held her and let her cry, and I cried too, because I'd missed this. I'd missed her. When we finally pulled apart, we were both a mess. Red eyes, running noses, smeared mascara. We laughed, a watery sound, and I handed her a tissue. I'm trying to be better, Ashley said. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I started seeing a therapist. I'm working on why I said what I said, why I became the kind of person who could think that way. And I'm learning things about myself, about what I really value. That's good, I said. And I got a new job. Just part-time at a nonprofit that helps with housing assistance. It doesn't pay much, but it feels right. Like I'm doing something that matters. I'm proud of you. She looked at me, surprised. Really? Really? We finished dinner. We talked about small things. Her job, my volunteering, the weather, the holidays coming up. It wasn't deep. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. When she left that night, she hugged me at the door. "Can I come back?" she asked. "Next week?" "Yes," I said. "You can come back." And she did. She came back the next Sunday and the Sunday after that. We had dinner together, talked about our weeks, slowly rebuilt something that felt like trust. It wasn't easy. There were hard conversations, moments when old wounds reopened, times when I had to leave the room because I couldn't look at her without remembering what she'd said. But we kept trying. In January, she moved out of Jenna's place and into her own apartment, a studio in Capitol Hill, just a few blocks from mine. She got promoted at the nonprofit, started leading a team that worked with families facing eviction. She stopped wearing expensive clothes, stopped talking about vacations and investments, started talking about the people she was helping, the difference she was making. One Sunday in February after dinner, she asked me about the will. "Mom, I need to know. Are you ever going to put me back in it?" I looked at her. She'd changed so much in the past 4 months. She looked older, more serious, but also more at peace. "No," I said. "I'm not." She nodded slowly. "Okay. Does that bother you?" "Honestly, a little. But I understand why. And I think it's probably good for me to know that I'm not going to inherit anything, that I have to build my own life on my own terms." "I think so too." She smiled. "Besides, you're going to live forever anyway. You're too stubborn to die." I laughed. Damn right I am. In March, she asked if she could go to Mass with me. I was surprised. Ashley hadn't been to church in years, not since she'd left for college. But I said yes. And the next Sunday, we sat side by side in the pew at St. John's. She didn't take communion. She wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready to go to confession, to reconcile herself with the church. But she bowed her head during the prayers, and she listened to the homily. And when Father Rodriguez talked about forgiveness, I saw her wipe her eyes. Afterward, we walked through Cheeseman Park, crunching through the last patches of snow, breathing in the cold, clear air. "I like the new you," I said. She looked at me, surprised. "The new me?" "The person you're becoming. She's someone I want to know." "I like her too," Ashley said. "I like her better than the old me." We walked in silence for a while, and then she said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you forgive me?" I stopped walking. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the daughter who'd broken my heart, who'd said unforgivable things, who'd made me question everything I thought I knew about love and motherhood and grace. And I thought about all the Sundays we'd spent together, all the meals we'd shared, all the slow, painful work of rebuilding what had been shattered. "Yes," I said, "I forgive you." She started crying again, and I pulled her into a hug. We stood there on the path in Cheeseman Park, two women who'd lost each other and found each other again, holding on like we'd never let go. That night, I sat in my apartment and looked at the photo albums on the shelf. I pulled out the one from Ashley's childhood, flipped through the pages. Ashley at 3, covered in mud. Ashley at 7, missing her front teeth. Ashley at 16, wearing her homecoming dress. And I realized something. The house on Bannock Street was gone. The life I'd built there was gone. But the love I'd poured into that house, into that life, into my daughter, that wasn't gone. It was still here. Transformed, maybe. Refined by fire. But still here. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept through the night without waking up once. A year later, I was at the food bank when Marcus called me over. "Linda, there's someone here asking for you." I looked up from the box of canned goods I was sorting, and there was Ashley. But she wasn't alone. She'd brought 3 other people, a man and woman in their 30s, and a teenage girl who looked scared and tired. "Mom, this is the Rodriguez family," Ashley said. "They just got evicted from their apartment and they need help. I told them about the food bank, and I thought maybe—" "Of course," I said. I turned to the Rodriguezes, smiled. "Let's get you taken care of." I spent the next hour helping them fill boxes with food, connecting them with other resources, making calls to shelters and assistance programs. Ashley worked beside me, efficient and compassionate, talking to the teenage girl, making her laugh, giving her hope. When the Rodriguezes left, Ashley stayed behind. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing me this, for bringing me here, even when I was at my worst, for teaching me that there's more to life than houses and money and inheritances." I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd hurt me so deeply, who'd fought her way back from that hurt, who'd become someone I was genuinely proud of, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that felt like peace. "You taught yourself," I said. I just opened the door. She hugged me and I hugged her back, and for the first time in a long time I felt complete. We walked out of the food bank together, into the bright Colorado sunshine. The mountains were visible in the distance, snow-capped and eternal, and the air smelled like spring, like new growth, like possibility. "Want to grab coffee?" Ashley asked. "I'd love that." We walked down the street, side by side, mother and daughter, two women who'd lost everything and found what mattered. And as we walked, I thought about Frank. I thought about the house on Bannock Street. I thought about all the years I'd spent building a life, only to have it fall apart. But I also thought about what had grown from that rubble. A stronger faith, a deeper understanding of love, a relationship with my daughter that was more honest, more real, more grounded in grace than anything we'd had before. I'd lost my house, but I'd found something more valuable. I'd found my way back to my daughter, and I'd found my way back to myself. The end, I spent all day decorating the house for my daughter's birthday, but before she came in, I heard her tell her boyfriend, "I can't wait to sell this house when the old lady dies." The next day, when she tried to use the card, the bank had already canceled it,